Thank you so much, Dr. Adams, and thank you, Dr. Anderson, for this prolific and magnificent presentation. It's good to see you again after a few weeks. You're so inspiring. Your book is amazing. I've looked into it and using it for source work. I'd like to quote Joseph Stalin at this time, if you don't mind. Of all people, Joseph Stalin, the most anti-democratic dictatorial leader of the world, he said, it's not who votes that counts, it's who counts the votes.
Yes.
Okay, so voter suppression is a way of actually determining who will actually count which votes. Am I right? And that's what's going on here. And back in 1876, doctor, as you mentioned, the election between Tilden and Hayes, President Hayes and Samuel Tilden, was one in which there was an electoral college dispute. In the end, the two parties made a deal. They compromised behind the scenes, made a deal to say, okay, Mr. Hayes, you can keep those electoral votes so you can become re-elected president. But we, the Democrats, who was Tilden's party, Southern Democrats, that's when the party was run by racists, right, all the way. Tilden said, and his people said, you can keep those electoral votes, you can be president again, Mr. Hayes, but we want something from you. We want you to remove those troops, the Union troops, out of this area. This is our country, our part of the country. We'll take care of our people. We'll take care of our voting, and then all hell broke loose after that. All hell in terms of the suppression of the votes. So I'm just asking you, has something happening today where we're seeing not exactly the same replay here, but something similar to where there's a concerted effort since the Supreme Court ruling against this 1965 Voting Rights Act to actually ensure that many people will not vote, who tend to vote for one party over the other. And what is the major threat to the election, the possible election of Vice President Harris in this regard, in the Harris and Trump contest? The swing states are so close right now. Just a few thousand votes either way could tip the election one way or the other. So all these methods of voter suppression have been brought up to us. It's so important what you're doing right now. I'd like you to touch on that specifically on this election and where it is, could be these things occurring to ensure that only one candidate will get elected, not the other. Meaning trying to ensure that former President Trump will get elected rather than our Vice President, Kamala Harris. Could you touch on that, please?
So I'm going to come back to Georgia. Because when Trump was here, I'm sorry, and I lost my poker face at 31. So when he was here, he actually praised the 3 members on the state election board, and he called them his pit bulls. Yeah. And shortly thereafter, they began to issue those rulings in terms of certification of the election. And one of the other pieces and I don't think this one has gone through yet because there's been a lot of pushback. They wanted to require county boards of election to hand count the votes on election day. Well, you can't start counting the votes until after the polls have closed, which is 7 p.m. When you look at Fulton County, which is part of Atlanta, has 750,000 registered voters. I forget the other county's name. One of the smaller counties has like 1,200 registered voters. So imagine being required to count, not that you're going to get full turnout, but at least 500,000 ballots by hand between 7 and midnight. Or what that means if you only have to count like 1,200 or 800 between 7 and midnight. And the state is not giving those counties any additional money. So they can't like hire people. So one of the things, SB 202, which was the voter suppression bill that Georgia put in place after the 2020 election, one of the things that it did was it banned the use of outside money because the pandemic required all kinds of stuff to happen. And Georgia was like, no, we're not giving you any money. And so Zuckerberg's organization said any county can apply for money. The big counties did. The smaller counties did not. And so the state legislature looked at that and said, that's unfair. That's unequal. And so no outside money. And so you get these requirements to be able to leap these tall buildings in a single bound without the resources to be able to do so. And so I think about the kinds of pressures that we're putting on our election officials to be able to run free and fair elections when you have a malevolent force that does not want free and fair elections and will penalize them for trying to do the work without the resources. So that's what I see happening. And I think about what's also happening is the threats of violence raining down on our election officials, and how you've had massive number of folks who have the experience in terms of being at the polls, basically resigning because of the threat of violence that comes in from the right wing. So that's part of what's real, and the refusal to acknowledge that threat of violence as real. That I think is also really destabilizing. Yeah. So yeah, and that quote by Stalin was absolutely pitch doggone perfect. When we were playing cards, we used to say, "He who has the pen wins." And that's exactly what that is. So I get to choose how the count goes. And if I don't like these votes, they're not getting counted. And this is why folks are talking about we have to turn out where it's too big to rig. We have to have this massive turnout where it's just like this tsunami coming in, that makes it very difficult to find 11,780 votes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.